welcome to the next edition of BCast, Bostrom's podcast about everything in the association world that you're curious about or would love to know about. We have a special guest here today, Michael Dominguez, President and CEO of ALHI, the Associated Luxury Hotels International, which I think everyone says ALHI.
Yeah, we do. We say ALHI.
Yes, ALHI. So, Michael, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We have some great questions for you and a rapid-fire Q&A that we do with all of our guests.
Awesome.
But the first thing I'd love to ask is, because the association industry and career paths in the association world, we all come at it in different ways.
Yeah.
And would love to hear about your journey that kind of led to ALHI and your role there today.
Yeah, it's first, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here, and it's nice to be back in the city.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've been to Chicago, although I picked the hottest day of the year to be here on Monday night.
Yes,
yeah, right before a massive rainstorm and tornadoes. Now I felt like I was back in Texas, so that was good.
We made you feel at home.
You really did.
Yeah.
But thank you for having me. My journey started in the hotel side of the world, and it was 35 years. And I'm of the generation that we got in this by accident. I was bussing tables when I was 15 years old at Hyatt hotels, and that's how I got into the industry. I didn't know it was an industry. Didn't know you could have a career. Today I'm happy that we have hospitality schools and we have programming in universities and all aspects of our life. So it makes it much better for a pipeline. But I was an accidental. I really was, and got addicted to this industry, did 9 years of operations. I did food and beverage for 9 years. And you've heard me talk about food costs, and I know we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
That's why I'm really good at talking to that, because 9 years of my life, it was all about margins and operations, and operations is all margins.
Yeah.
And you realize how tight the margins are. And then I ran into a mentor that tapped me and pulled me into sales, and he was a GM at Hyatt and said, why? And he used to run Hyatt's worldwide sales from Chicago, actually, by the way. And he's like, why aren't you in sales? And he moved me into sales and took me with him. He left Hyatt. I left Hyatt and started working with some independent hotels, ended up at a CVB for a few years as a VP, moved into Lowe's Hotels, which led me to MGM. And it was interesting. Lowe's to MGM were 7 years exactly to the day. When I signed the offer letter to go to MGM, it was 7 years exactly. And when I signed to come to ALHI, it was 7 years to the day. And in both jobs, I wasn't looking. It just happened. I always say I was minding my own business, doing my thing. And it's a piece of advice I give young leaders.
Yeah.
If you were to ask me what's next, I don't know. I have no idea. And right now I can tell you I do. It's ALHI. I have found the job that I love, and we're building something very cool. It's going to be a long runway, so I'm here for a long time. But in every career stop, it was always, what's next? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think people that are worried about the next stop continue to get off focus of what they should be doing every day. And if you lower your head and do what you're supposed to do, everything else will take care of itself. And
I absolutely agree. Whenever I was asked that question, I've had 3 distinct careers in different industries.
Right.
And whenever I was asked that question, where do you want to be in 5 years?
Yeah.
I don't know. Things change too fast.
Exactly.
I have no idea, but I love what I'm doing now.
That's all that matters.
Yeah.
And you don't know the opportunity until it taps you.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up here. We've been a member of ALHI in my past life with Lowe's for 7 years. So I was a 14-year member. I always joke that I feel like the guy that, the hair club. Like, I'm not only the president, I was a member as well. That's kind of how I feel about all of this. But I literally was tapped by, we're private equity, and the owner, our primary owner with Boathouse Capital, his name's Bill Dyer, and he's a wonderful boss. And he took the time for 90 days, and he went to members, and he went to clients, and he went to team members, and he's like, if I was to wave a magic wand, what does this look like?
Mm-hmm.
And he came to Vegas because I was with MGM, and MGM is still our largest member, so he wanted to come talk to me from that capacity of what they needed to do with ALHI.
Sure.
And then he asked to talk to me off the side, and he said, to a person, as I've gone and asked this question, your name comes up. And he said, would you be interested? And it's a joke because I told him no.
Yeah.
And then he asked me again, and we talked, and I told him no. And it was funny because we were sitting, I'll never forget this, we're sitting at MGM, MGM brand, and we're having this conversation. He goes, Mike, are you sure you're not interested? This is a really cool job. And I go, look around. Cool is not the selling factor. But like, I've got a cool job. And then what was really interesting, he said, well, can you at least spend 30 minutes with me and tell me what you think we should be doing? And when we started having that conversation, he told me, in 30 minutes, you've given me 5 ideas nobody's mentioned. He says, are you sure you're not interested? And as usual, the tipping point was my wife of 35 years. We'll be 35 next 2 weeks.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, 35 years in 2 weeks. Met at the Hyatt, by the way, in San Antonio. But, she actually said, Mike, you get to be the CEO of a sales organization. How cool is that? You love sales. And I tell people, the only thing I've lost, and what's really funny, the only thing I've lost are revenue meetings, leadership meetings around the organization. They have nothing to do with my discipline. Right now, my time is always spent with clients, members, doing these things and the things we love about our industry and trying to make it better. And she's like, that's just the perfect fit for you. And then I had a client that had been a 20-year member or client of ALHI's, and he's one of my brothers, and he's a good friend of mine, and he happened to be in Vegas at that time, and we're having brunch, and I said, this is the opportunity. What do you think? Because he knew both. He knows ALHI. He knows me. He knew what I was doing. And he just says, Mike, as long as I've known you, you like breaking stuff. And you like to break it and rebuild it. And he goes, what else are you going to do here? Mm-hmm. Because we had been 7 years, and we had things kind of rolling, and then it was right. And that's what kind of got it going.
I love how the interview wasn't an interview, that he kind of started asking you questions about what you would do, which probably got you thinking, wow, this is what I would do.
Truly.
And put yourself in the place to kind of convince you to look at it as an opportunity.
It really was. And I hadn't even thought about it that way. And funny thing is, it's the same thing at MGM. When I went to MGM, and I tell that story often, I'm supposed to be having dinner with the president and the COO, and there's this empty seat. And I go, what's that? And they go, that's our chairman, Jim Muir. And he was speaking in Detroit. He's landing, he's coming right over. Yeah. And it was the only time I'm sitting there going, why am I here? Like, this is high pressure.
Right.
I've got a job. I'm good. I wasn't looking for this. And, they come in, I always joke, they come in, he sits down, they forget I'm there. I'm like eating dinner because they're bantering, and it was so good for me to see the healthiness of those relationships.
Oh, that is important.
Because they got along, they enjoy each other, and it was really fun banter. And then on a dime, he turned to me and asked me, so tell me why I'm here and tell me why these people like you so much. And it's something I share with a lot of young leaders, because I think the answer set the tone. You just said it. It's like it changed it from being an interview to a discussion.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, I'm here because people tell you I'm really good at what I do. But I'm really good at what I do because of the way I do it. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have to figure out if that fits for everybody.
Yeah.
Because we will all have buyer's remorse 6 months from now if you don't understand what you're buying. Mm-hmm. And it has to work. Yes. And I go, and if it doesn't work, it's been a pleasure getting to know you guys. Yeah. Like, no hard feelings. And it really just became a discussion through the evening. And I think too many people in an interview, I think the further you advance in your career, it's no longer an interview. Mm-hmm. It's a discussion.
Yes.
And what you're trying to find, is it a cultural fit? Is it a fit in my life and my time and where I'm at? And that's kind of what led me here when it's all done.
And you could relate that to sales too.
Without doubt.
Because when we are interviewing, when we do a proposal and we're interviewing a board to see if we're a fit, it's really a conversation about, are we going to fit together? Are we going to get along? And that's probably the same in your sales area too, in terms of, is it the right fit for ALHI? Is it the right property? Is it the right audience?
And that's what I think makes your company unique in Mostrom, because I know this about your culture. Not enough of people in this environment do that. How many people do you think go to a board and say, we hope this fits, but it has to fit for everybody. Right. It has to fit for us too. Yeah. Because it's reminding, I'm interviewing you as much as you're interviewing me. That's not common. And I think that's maturity in an organization and in culture and thought process. But I took this job June 19 or 2019. Or July 2019. July 8th was my first day, so I just hit my 5-year anniversary.
Oh my gosh. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I took it 9 months before we shut the world down. with COVID and, you know,
right.
having all hotels.
Oh
And
my gosh.
I told my team this, and I mean it even stronger today. I said, I was in the right place at the right time. I was where I was supposed to be. More importantly, today, it's where I want to be.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. And I say supposed to be because had I been in my old life in publicly traded companies, I would have had a muzzle during COVID. And you know the work we did and ALHI did on the EIC task force for, you know, all of these.
All of that content and data and communication.
The curation that we were trying to get together.
Right.
I would have never been able to speak as freely as I was because I'm privately owned.
Wow, that's so true.
My boss doesn't care what I say. He just cares that I get him to his number.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, just run the business the way I need you to. You can do whatever you need.
Yeah.
That was freeing, and that tells me I was at the right place for the industry. I think I was at the right place to be able to jump in and help where I could because I was able to.
Yeah.
So
this question wasn't one of the ones I was thinking of, but you talk about private equity and you talk about that kind of ownership. There are quite a few AMCs out there that are looking, you know, succession planning and whether it's buying or being bought and, you know, how does that change? But, you know, so we've seen a few private equity firms get involved in the AMC acquisitions. And it's interesting, you know, we're just kind of sitting back and watching and, you know, it's interesting, but I would love to hear your perspective about that type of ownership.
Yeah, you have to choose wisely. You know, I felt like an old Indiana Jones movie, like choose wisely. Yeah. Because it does matter. I'm fortunate when I say I have a wonderful boss. And I'll give you an example. You know, our private equity will probably exit next year and we'll move over to another private equity programming. And it's not a secret because we've gotten them to where they needed to be to move on to the next step. And what you find out with private equity is, you know, if you're the first time buy, like if somebody was to buy Bostrom right now, and it's the first time, then that is all about you continuing to grow and doing your thing. When you get to that second one, it's like whoever's going to buy you is going to want to acquire other pieces. Like we were talking about us acquiring a marketing. Right. We're doing some of that ahead of time to know, one, that we can do it, two, that it fits. So whoever buys us understands the other pieces we think we need to get to the next multiple. They understand we can do it. Yeah. But whoever buys us next, they're going to want to. It's a different strategy. They want to grow. Yeah. And they're going to want to bring in other pieces and stuff. So every piece of it's a little bit different. And they're usually anywhere between 5 to 9 year windows. It can vary. So I think understanding what their strategy is for what time period. Exactly. And of course the right fit. If they're just trying to flip it, that's different. Right. That's not who I have. And where I would tell you that I have the right type of boss, you know, right now, and the reason I was saying we're going to exit, you know, I have an opportunity. I want to grow out a whole leisure segment to our business. And I think it's the piece that we could. And they're all in favor. They understand it. But my question to them is, look, in a year you're going to sell. Any type of expense you have to multiply by the multiple. It's no longer, if you were to spend $300,000, you're not spending $300,000 as an investment. That's a $3 million investment if your multiple's 10. Because that coming to the bottom line gives you that kind of multiple. Yeah. So my question to him and to the board at our last board meeting is like, I want to build out leisure. Should I start now? Or do I save that expense for the new owner? And where you know you're with the right people is the question I get from my boss is it the right business decision? Right. I go, yes, sir. And he's like, then do it. It's as simple as that. Wow. Now, that's the right type of ownership because there's a truth. I've seen it another way. Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. It's picking the right. I think sometimes private equity gets a bad rap because of where they fall. And there's differences. There's strategic equity. And strategic equity, it's all about driving to a number and driving it quickly. That's different than private equity where I'm with a small fund, a couple of $1 billion that they have, 17 companies. It's a mid-sized small fund that they deal with. So it's different in that world. Right. You're dealing with the major strategic equity groups. That's different because the pressure is very different. Right. But for this type of world, I would think, and when you're talking about AMCs, they're going to be, in most cases, you're dealing with more family-owned or smaller businesses that are private equity. It's picking the right ones. And what I love is, like, I've been doing some banker conferences recently, and it's just to understand what questions am I going to get when we really get to market. So we're kind of presenting our company, and it's kind of filling your way. And it's good for me because by the time we actually get to this, and I'll be doing a lot of those,
right?
I have a lot of practice. It's not going to be foreign on what I'm supposed to be doing, how I'm talking about my company, what questions are they going to ask me.
Yeah.
So I've done 3 of them. So there's not a question I think they can ask that I don't have an answer to now.
Right.
But when you start to do that, what's really interesting is you find there are some that look just like my ownership.
Yeah.
They're a family fund. They've spun off something that's just private equity with a larger bank.
Yeah.
But it's all family owned and stuff. So it's a different world. And everything I'm telling you, I would have never learned in my old job.
Yeah.
The reason I'm so excited is I've learned this part of the world, which I had no introduction to.
So I think for our AMC listeners, I think that was very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting for them to hear that perspective.
And I'm happy to give my advice to any of them if they ever want to. I mean, that's it. Yeah. Because we can tell you that there's reputations on the street, and we can help with reputations and tell you what we know and what we don't.
Yeah.
So,
after what you've experienced.
Absolutely.
So that's great.
Because I support the community, so anything we can do to help the community.
Yeah. So kind of turning it over to association industry type, for the association leaders that are listening.
Yes.
Or viewing. So we're seeing numbers come back, of course.
Oh, yeah.
We're blowing out reg numbers. Some are even breaking records, which is awesome. Some groups are a little slower. Depends on the sector, depends on the type of organization, but we are challenged by rising cost, workforce issues at venues. I know that your content strategy at ALHI is it's so impressive and informative. What are you seeing out there in terms of these challenges that associations are having with the meetings?
Yeah, the one thing I've struggled with, and this is with either corporate or association, clients, is trying for them to be able to speak to stakeholders and get stakeholders to understand this is the reality of life. I used to hear often, and this was in 23, I'd hear often that some stakeholders freaking out because their rates were 22% higher than 2019. And I'm like, and inflation is 21% higher than 2019. Why is that a surprise? Mm-hmm. And that's where I think there's a disconnect. It has nothing to do with 2019 because we had record inflation over the last 3 years. And I don't have, here's the good news. The rate of growth has slowed down and we're back to normal rates of growth. But for any association that hasn't caught up yet to what we've experienced over the last 4 years, and they might be waiting for inflation to slow down, I think the very misleading piece of the headline, inflation is declining. We're down to 3%. The rate of growth is declining. Growth, which means the 21% we've experienced is baked in forever. It's never going away.
That is a great way to, that's a great way to look at that.
And I think that is so missing in the headline. It is the rate of growth we're celebrating that's only 3% higher than last year. But until we go negative, you've never gotten rid of the 21%, 22% that we've experienced.
Right.
And that I think is missing when we're talking to stakeholders to say, look, and I have one chart I show that I get requested all the time now. It shows you that, yes, food and beverage pricing is coming down. It's 20% higher than 2019.
Yeah, still. And the budgeting process hasn't caught up with that. Like, that's the conversation that we're having to, we're like, budget this the right way, plan for this.
And my challenge is associations for the longest period of time. Oh, no, I can't raise my reg fee. Why? Everything else is more expensive.
Yeah.
Everything in our world is more expensive. But for some reason, we're saying, I have to stay at static pricing. And now we're struggling because the conversation we get is, I don't have more budget. And I'm coming back saying, well, you need to increase your reg fee because my costs aren't going down. Right. There is no way to, and if this gives any comfort, I don't know if it does or doesn't, but all-time record revenue in the hotel world last year. Mm-hmm. We're losing profit year over year in the hotel world in 2023. Oh. All-time record revenue. Right. Losing profit because the revenue is not outpacing our expenses. And the number one expense in all venues is labor. Mm-hmm. And our increase in labor for us was literally double all private industry. Wow. If you look at what we've increased. So we've increased our average wage in the hospitality industry by 24%.
Wow.
Since 2020. So to think, and we all think about food and beverage and we think about everything, it's labor.
Yeah.
My labor cost is through the roof. And there's a celebration going on in our industry, and I think it should, that housekeepers are finally getting paid $20 an hour.
Right.
But
wages are up.
Yeah, but when people tell me when are rates going back, never.
Yeah.
Because those housekeepers are always going to be making that and more moving forward, which means I can't go backwards.
And don't you couple that with a labor shortage?
There's not a labor shortage.
There isn't.
No, and that is the one thing I always talk about. We talk about old narratives in our industry.
Yeah.
And we tend to talk about things that are 9 months old. Was there a labor shortage? Absolutely. Do you know we have more employees in the hospitality sector today than we did in 2019?
No.
And we're 100,000 over. And if you look at every labor report, who's number 1, 2, or 3? Hospitality. It's hospitality and services.
Yeah.
But we keep talking about these labor shortages, and I'm like, we don't have labor shortages. What we do have, and this is a conversation, that labor shortage was kind of impacted and almost compounded because we quit allowing people in on J1 and H2B visas. During COVID, nobody could travel on a visa because nobody could travel. So we depend on those 60 to 80,000 jobs every year. And what most people don't understand, the way that temporary labor, if you go to a resort, I promise you, you've experienced in the summer, you've experienced Jamaicans, Haitians, specifically in housekeeping. They're all J1. And what people don't get is that, okay, everybody gets out of school. Everybody floods the beaches. So I multiply by 10% my occupancy, which won't withstand once I get past summer and everybody's back in school. Mm-hmm. So I need temporary labor to help us. That's the J1. And what they end up doing is they help us in the summer, and then they tend to move to our ski resorts that are about to get into their season, and then they get to go home and do it all over again. Or they're here for 18 months.
And there you don't see a shortage. There's no shortage.
No, what I was going to say was there was a shortage. That was why you were feeling it.
Yes.
During there. Yeah. We've got those back, and by the good work of U.S. Travel and a lot of other organizations, they've actually gotten the administration to basically make one little change because we hit our cap usually by first quarter, by March.
Yeah. We
hit our cap. And it means we need more. We always need more.
Right.
What we've gotten them to do is to not include in our cap number anybody who's repeating. So if I have 40,000 of them that are coming back in year 2, they're no longer counted against the cap, which means my 60,000 is now 100,000. So that's going to help us as well. But overall, labor's not the issue. And what I do think is we tend to take one experience and then we make it a general narrative because the narrative was there. 18 months ago, that narrative is completely fair. Today, I always tell people, you got to stop. And the one thing I always ask is, I ask the question when they say, when are we going to be fully staffed? I go, trained or untrained? Different question. It doesn't mean I don't have the people, but sometimes we're throwing bodies in because we need the bodies, and I haven't done the training to get them where we want them to be, and that's where it feels clunky. But that doesn't mean I'm short on labor. It just means I don't have somebody that's quality yet as far as their education.
Because of training and where they are. Yeah.
Because you're throwing them in. And then you think about how we came out of this. We're just throwing bodies in at times.
Right.
And you're learning on the fly. And that's not how we normally do it. It's usually you've got 2 weeks of training before you ever get behind the front desk by yourself. And now we're throwing them behind the front desk and said, oh, we'll help a manager help you out.
Yeah.
Because you needed that help. That's where I think there's still clunkiness. I think you see it in the AV experience in our hotels at times. And I think we sometimes just beat up the AV companies, and they have the same issues. There's a lot of new people learning the job.
Yeah.
And I have said, CVent had this, in their reporting recently, almost a third of all planners that are planning with companies that have always planned in CVent are brand new. There's new on the planner side. There's new on our side. And I always joke when I make this comment, I go, I hear from planners all the time, you guys have a whole bunch of new people. And I go, and so do you.
Yes.
And I think that means we all need to have a little more grace with each other and know that we need to take the time to explain and understand. Even the questions you're asking now, we have to take the time to understand. And that's why I'm so passionate about educating.
Yeah.
Because where else are you going to learn it unless we're trying to explain to you what is and what isn't?
Yeah.
And these are the challenges with cost. But gee, I don't have a better answer except you need to increase your budgets.
Yes.
Because they're not going backwards.
Exactly.
And you know, when I said inflation's never, the 21% is baked in, forever.
Yeah.
I always tell people that is why my father will tell you that when he was a kid that a loaf of bread cost 25 cents. And it will never cost 25 cents again.
Ever. Never
Ever.
again.
Because inflation never goes backwards.
Right.
We all forget that
That's
it's a rate of growth. And I think it's hugely misleading when you see a headline. And that's not beating up the media. It's just the reality.
And I think it's the pandemic, too.
Yeah.
Like there was an occurrence. There was something that happened that people thought, well, we'll go back.
Yeah.
But not taking into account the economics of it.
But
right?
the funny thing is we closed down part of the economy for a short period of time, but then other parts of the economy where people just went home to work.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it stopped, and that's why inflation kept growing.
That's true. Yeah.
And then you had the supply chain issues that kind of added to it. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the biggest issue, and you can see it in charts. It's interesting. We haven't spent through all of it yet. We hit a record $2.5 trillion in excess savings that shouldn't have been in savings accounts.
Oh, wow.
And I think, candidly, that is a big reason we had hyperinflation.
Yeah.
Because it's like playing with house money in a casino.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't your money. And by the way, the 3 stimulus bills we passed were $2.5 trillion.
Wow.
So think about this. We gave a bunch of money to a lot of people that couldn't go anywhere and spend it anywhere, and they were still employed. So it went into bank accounts.
Yeah.
And that's not a criticism on the policy. It's a reality of the money that was stuck there.
Yeah.
And that is why you heard when we came out of this in 2022, people were paying $2,000 to stay at a resort and not caring.
Yeah.
Because they had all this money that wasn't theirs.
Yeah.
It was given money that was just sitting in a bank. The $2.5 trillion, we roughly, depending on which analyst you're looking at, it's still a half billion.
Yeah.
That's sitting in accounts. And we've had this separation. It's the lower segment, the lower earning segment that is spent through it all. The higher earning segment didn't even need it.
No.
So it's still sitting there. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're seeing luxury and upper upscale continue to drive.
Yes.
That's a concern because guess where all your meeting space is? Luxury, upper upscale.
Yeah.
That's the pressure.
Yeah.
And it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And then I think one thing that has to be kept in mind, where you have your meeting space is a different tier of hotel, luxury, upper upscale. The boomer generation, first generation, and I don't think people are factoring this in enough. It's the wealthiest, longest living generation in history. Mm-hmm. They were the birth of the 401k plans. There is 26 trillion sitting in 401k plans that they have to start withdrawing at 72, and they don't need it. So what we're finding is that getting pushed into the economy, specifically in the luxury segment and travel and experiences, and it's continuing to drive. That's why recently, have you noticed, every hotel company is getting into the luxury segment, even when they weren't.
Yes,
because it's this pipeline, and it's a pipeline of money that's coming.
Is that prompting your leisure? You were talking about something with ALHI and going into
the leisure? No, it's this is just different. Natural.
Okay.
Because we've always been in the luxury segment, but this is why I'm really excited that I'm in the luxury segment.
Right.
Because all of the growth right now, if you look, JLL has a report through 2030, we're the fastest growing segment outside of what is, of course, the mid-scale in that. But and the independent is continuing to stay. There's a lot of independent there. So
location. So because of the rising costs, because of budgeting and everything like that, we're starting to look at tier 2, tier 3, and we don't even like those terms.
No, I understand. Secondary cities.
Secondary cities.
Yes.
We're starting to be creative about the cities and locations that we're going to in order to combat that. Are you seeing anything any sites that are popping up that are more popular?
I'll tell you the hottest destinations we're seeing, and they're kind of off the radar a little bit. But then I'll also mention, here's the challenge. You're going to secondary cities, and a lot of the airlift was pulled from the secondary cities and has not been pulled back.
Yeah.
So it's great that you have the availability, but now it's really expensive to get there, or you can't get there.
Yeah.
So that that will self-adjust. It just is going to take time, but we're kind of in that middle adjustment period. But we see a lot of dynamics when you look at the areas like Louisville that are kind of off the market. Raleigh, I always say, I think is the next Nashville. Because you look at where they're adding an expansion to the convention center, they're adding an anchor hotel. That's how Nashville started.
Yeah.
And by the way, both of those were Omnis. Omni launched with the convention center expansion. Omni's going to be part of the convention center expansion.
Did they do that in Oklahoma City too?
They did in Oklahoma City too, and that has now again that was another thing.
Yeah.
Exactly, those are all been put on the map because of that. And what I always do is look at where are the expansions going as far as convention centers and
that's a great way to look at it,
because that's where you'll look at 2 to 3 years down the road. That's hot. How do you get in early?
Yeah,
because it's going to get really expensive once it's hot.
Right.
We'll get in on the early buy on the vision versus it being completed. I think that, and then we're dealing with one, and this is really off the radar, Knoxville, Tennessee, and Knoxville has a vision as that entire destination to really grow it into that kind of destination.
Yeah.
And it's all central in the main city with the convention center.
Yeah.
So, it's definitely
interesting. That's a great way to approach it for sure.
Seriously. Just look at where the money's going, and then you'll know where you should be planning.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Awesome.
Cool.
Okay, last question.
Okay.
I'm kind of combining a couple of things, but I found it really interesting. You bought a digital marketing company.
Yeah.
I saw a partnership with Simon Sinek's company, the Optimism Company, that I'm just a huge fan of his.
Me too. Seriously.
And so I wanted to hear more about your content strategy at ALHI.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What the strategy is there.
So 2 things. We went into a content marketing strategy 3 to 4 years ago, and the idea was, how do we become a single resource to our planner community? And that really has taken off. I know you sent me a note because we have a podcast. Well, that podcast came from the aha moment. We do these great live events for the meeting planning community. We're partnered with leading authorities. So I get some of the top speakers in the world, and they speak. And this is, to me, the challenge with the meetings world to begin with. How do you get the meeting to live beyond the 4 walls of a meeting room?
Right.
Always a challenge. Mm-hmm. So the aha, when I first got here, I see this and I'm like, God, great speaker. And then that's it. Yeah. So now part of their contract is they have to come on the podcast. So they speak at our event. Mm-hmm. We continue to dive deeper on the podcast, and that is called Beyond the Meeting Room. And it's important because the name means it. If you've listened to any piece of it, it's about leadership. It's about life. We're not talking about meetings.
Right.
And the interesting thing is that turned into a luxury magazine we published that's called Beyond the Meeting Room.
Yes.
And again, it's about life, and we always have stories that have a veteran analysis. We always do something around the veteran, the military. We do something always around human trafficking because we're committed to that effort. But it's just a really good, our inaugural edition was Jose Andres, the chef, that was on the cover, but it was about him feeding the world. It wasn't about him being a chef.
Right.
So we always take a little bit of a different take on it, and it's not about our industry. That content has started to, and you'll love this because you're a marketing nut. The digital magazine, 9.5 minutes average time on the digital magazine online.
Wow.
Which means the content's valuable. It's not
long time. Yeah.
And it's not over advertised. The only people that can advertise in it are our members right now. And it's barely paying for itself. And that was my goal.
Applications are tough.
But my goal was, can it pay for itself?
Yeah.
Because then it's value add.
Right.
And then we take that content, and as you would, we get to repackage it and do it in different ways. And what I love is the digital magazine. We really had we have a really wonderful marketing team that's internal, a team of 4 that does some amazing work. But they take that magazine that's in print, and when it gets to digital, it's not just a reprint of it. Where you had a story, there's now digital assets, video assets to the story.
Yeah.
So you get to read the story, but now get into a video that continues onto it. So we've really been thoughtful on how we've put that together, and it's kind of built a community where people are very engaged. For a B2B site, in our last 30 days, we had over 30,000 visits and 12,000 unique visits.
Wow, nice.
To a B2B site.
Wow.
And we can see where they're driving, and the content drives them there, and then they go and look at our hotel sites, and it's really
get curious about you and what you do.
It is.
And
it might be Pollyanna in nature, but our thought is if we're doing good work for our community and good work for the industry, the rest of it will take care of itself. And we've kind of built this community around it. And then we have all these hotel members, and what we do realize is, most of us, we represent the independent world.
Yeah.
So if you're in the independent space, you don't have a brand that's powering your marketing, powering your PR. You have to go find that. So what we do know is that we have an audience that for us to go out and buy a creative agency, which we did, 62 above, I now have, and when I say we bought them, they became ALHI employees on March 30th. They are part of our company. We've completely
fully integrated.
Yeah, without a doubt, they're ALHI.
Yeah.
And because of that, and we picked somebody that culturally was the right fit. That they are who we are. We know they'll take good care of our clients and the key to that is not that hard. Do they take good care of their people?
Yes.
Because if they take good care of their people, they'll take good care of everybody else. And that was kind of our moving piece on making that decision because we could have bought others. This was the right fit when it was all done. So we bought that, and I mentioned to you we're looking at a couple of other acquisitions, and one of them might be a PR company that fits really perfectly in the luxury hotel space. But it starts to give us all the pieces that really support our hotel members. And the beauty is it doesn't have to be exclusive to ALHI members.
Right.
I could sell those services to anybody.
Yeah.
So it's kind of blue ocean in that regard.
Yeah.
But for ALHI, I'm really supporting. And when I came to ALHI, the commentary I always said, how do we get everybody sticking with us? And what I meant by that is how do I become so valuable to them that no matter what's happening on my group bookings, because I might be a little light because of a year or whatever, but I'm doing so many other value adds for them.
Yeah.
That there's value in
which are those marketing services or media services.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All of those pieces. And then we've had these sponsorships or partnerships that we've put together that are very strategic. And Simon Sinek is one of those, and it's the most recent. But, they have an online learning course, and Simon all about leadership and how you build leadership. Well, again, independent hotels that don't have their own path around that. Whoever's in human resources they're kind of doing their own thing. So something we're doing that's unique that to kind of help integrate all this is we're launching a marketing exchange, and that's bringing all the marketing people from the hotels together to learn what's going on in marketing, but to also know they're a community and be able to help educate them and know that they're a network because they're all part of the ALHI family. We've never done that, and these are independents, so they're by themselves out there.
Right.
But then we're doing the same on the HR component. We're going to bring all the HR people together to really talk about, now you're a community. And if you're struggling with something, if you're struggling with something and you're at Terranea, you can call the Broadmoor.
Right.
HR, because you now know and you've met them. You can ask them, how are you dealing with this?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of missing as an opportunity for us to kind of leverage our scale. And then what I'm not forgetting or I want to keep on the radar, with all these services, I have this massive meeting planner community that could utilize the services too.
That's true.
I have certain third-party meeting planners.
Yeah.
It's their own little business that they might need creative services or they might need help in social media and PR services. It's almost like a little bit of an AMC.
It is. But
not
for an independent hotel
world.
community.
And for planners that might need them. Because what we even look at is, when every planner that's planning out meetings, they're going to have a new logo, they're going to have a new concept, a new design for every meeting. If I can kind of package that to make it simple and turnkey, and they can do it online, and we can do the graphics very quickly, especially when it's simple work, can we simplify their life and become a little stickier with that?
A little value add right there. Keeps them close to the community, and I love that.
So that's pretty much the concept. But in addition to Simon Sinek, we've connected with the Aruna Project, and if you're not familiar with the Aruna Project, highly recommend them. They do really high-end leather goods, like for gifting. But every single employee in that company is a survivor from human trafficking.
Oh, wow.
So they built a company to give people lives when they've been rescued. And I love that since we've been committed to human trafficking efforts, that these type of companies continue to come out of the woodwork because we had no idea who they were and what they were. And, the CEO of that organization yesterday sent me an email and just said, knowing how passionate you are, I wanted to let you know we have a new survivor that just started. And he shares stories with me to let me know. But, you're going to buy these goods anyway, and they're high quality. I mean, seriously, really great quality. The only difference is everybody that works, you're supporting such a good cause by doing those things. Those are the things we're trying to bring to the table because they're outliers. Most people would have never heard of the Aruna Project if we didn't get involved with them. So that's what we look at in our strategic partnership. Simon said, like, we're not going to do a whole bunch of things. Simon's it for us in that space. And it's us bringing some value add around training and education.
Oh, that's great. That is so interesting.
Yeah, and candidly, that goes back to my Vegas days because I met Simon and I always had this vision of doing something and I still want to do it. And we've talked about it. We have some ideas. But, you know, the main musical artists, the reason they do residencies is they want to perform, but they don't want to travel. But they love performing. And that's why they'll do a residency, say, I don't have to travel. I still get to do it. I still get paid. I always wanted to do a thought leadership residency. Come spend 2 days with Simon Sinek and have that spelled out over here's 4 or 5 dates. That's what we were working on in Vegas before I left.
Wow.
They actually told me it was a funny comment. They said, that all went to hell once the lawyers got involved, you know, because there's just a lot to work through. And there's a lot of programming to work through. But we've talked about how do we still do that. There's an opportunity.
If you still do that, I want to be there.
You got it. Absolutely. Because I think it's a wonderful idea. I think
it is.
Just like people would go see Taylor Swift, people would go see Simon for value, and you could put content around it as well.
For sure.
But it's really just about self-development, that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's very strong. I mean, I loved how you kind of put together this content strategy or approaches to partnerships. And you're right, there is some synergies there with the AMC world as well. I mean, we were, with this podcast, we were trying to just tell stories, right? Like what's going on out there? How can, in the association world, and how are these different players having an impact and helping associations with growth and mission impact and things like that. So this was, very, very interesting. And I think, you know, for Bostrom's podcast, we want to continue to tell those stories and those human stories. You know, we've got AI and all this stuff on the operations and, you know, but it's like, where's the human stories? And that's where you've done a great job integrating those with your content strategy.
You know, with AI, I heard a tech exec, he said it brilliantly. He says, AI will not replace people. AI will replace the people that don't learn how to work with AI.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love that statement.
Yes.
Like, you need to learn how to use it.
Have to.
But don't be afraid of it, but you need to learn how to use it, because if you're not, that's when you're going to get replaced.
But
I thought it was
embraced, for sure. Embraced it. Just...
And us too. You know, we're learning and going through it and figuring out where and not everything makes sense. Some does.
Right.
And I think we spend too much time talking about generative versus automated AI, because some of the things we're automating are really impactful for our work versus the generative.
Yeah.
The generative, it's there and that's kind of sexy and fun. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And more for our marketing. I think generative is really great in some marketing features.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you something we're doing, like we're using AI that on a simple email delivery that we're trying to send to clients, and we have an event coming up and we're going to send this out. AI is going through, there's an AI feature that is actually going through, and what it's telling me is that if I'm sending you an email, that email, even though I hit send, you're not going to see it till 5 o'clock, because that's usually when you read my emails.
Yes.
After your work.
Yes, exactly.
Not getting it at noon and then deciding I'm trying to clear my mailbox and I'm just going to put it somewhere else and never get to it. So it's allowing us to deliver when people are, it's the most optimal for them to read what we send them. We did that for an event and we had over a 75% open rate.
Yeah.
And the click-through rate was in the 60s, which means it was effective, because that's not normal for us.
No, that's not normal for
anybody. And the only difference was that. And now that was an event, so now we're testing it broader. Will it be the same for something that's more informational versus an event that you're raising? So we're trying to do some learnings in it, but to me, that's the simplest example when I can tell people that's a wonderful use of AI.
Exactly.
It's making it more effective with what I've always done.
Right.
It's making it more effective and making the outcome better. That's kind of the point.
Our marketing team's working on we're bringing in a platform for social, but it's integrated into Canva. It has AI integration to do the exact same thing in terms of social post. You know, based on this audience, what is the best day? What's the best time to really put these out there? And based on network behavior too. So it's like...
And it would take you 6 months to analyze that with human beings.
Oh, it would have been, we never would have done it. We wouldn't have had time.
Yeah, and that's why AI, that's where I think people overthink it. I said the amount of processing that is being done so quickly, I would have never been able to do with human capacity. I would have never been able to afford it.
Exactly.
either time or money
Yeah.
to make that happen. And,
Yeah.
and to me, that's kind of the beauty of it. And I'm really
Right.
excited where all of those pieces are headed.
Yeah.
And knowing this community, one of the things, it really occurred to me when we're talking, I think it's really important to color outside the lines. And I'm not sure enough businesses do today.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean by breaking the rules. I follow the rule book to the letter. I'm saying about learning how to disrupt and disrupt yourself
Yeah.
and how to break and break it often. And I don't think we do that enough
Yeah.
in organizations. And, like I told you, a friend of mine says, you like breaking stuff.
Yeah.
And rebuild. I do. Even after I built something, I would break it.
Yeah.
And rebuild it. And not for the sake of breaking it, just knowing.
No, you have to, you have to change. You have to recreate and reimagine, and because the world is around it, it's.
I was in a task force it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, but it was an ASAE task force, and we were talking about the future in this. And they were talking about the challenges of being a non-for-profit and what we can do. And then I said, okay, you said you wanted to throw bombs. Well, let's throw a bomb in the middle of the room. I said, do you have to be non-for-profit?
It's just
because that's a tax status.
Just a tax status.
So what if you lost the tax status? Would it be more beneficial for the organization? Now, for those that lobby, and I know there's all kinds of other rules, but I'm like, if you're really going to challenge yourself, because in certain organizations, then you could get some major funding from major corporations in a whole bunch of different areas. Is it worth it to give up this for some of the headaches it may cause? Is it worth it to do everything you want to do for your members? And I would challenge sometimes we have to think that way. Do I need to just blow up my model? Does it have to be this way?
Yeah. Or just nonprofit, it is a tax status. It doesn't mean you don't make a profit.
Agree. Well, and what I meant is like the restriction on what I can get from funding and not funding.
Yeah. And what can you do with that?
Yeah, because that changes everything. And if you get rid of that, is it worth getting rid of that? Because how big is your tax benefit versus what funding could come in? And I think that hasn't been thought through in certain areas. And that's just an example. And there's a lot to research. Yeah. But I think it's important upon all of it. Like when you're saying why you're going into leisure, because it's the next frontier. Yeah. Because what I do know in my hotel world, I'm only playing in what's 30% of their business at best.
Wow. Business meetings.
That's it. Groups at even a heavy group hotel on a year average is going to be 30% of their business, of their mix. So I'm not even touching.
That's a huge 70% of something.
It's a huge ocean for me to go swimming and figure out what we can and my whole point is, can I gain 10% of the 70%? Yeah. That's effective for us. Yeah. And I just think it's important for us to think about. So
similar to what AMCs are looking at with standalone associations.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just more and more people that we can talk about the model and the benefits. Great.
I agree.
It's something different, a different way for them to think about their business model.
Agreed. And it's getting leaders that are ready to look at their models very different. I think a great quote I was a big fan of John Chambers. He was the CEO of Cisco for 20 plus years. Brilliant man in how he put things into perspective. But he always said, disrupt or be disrupted, but disruptions come into your life and make the choice. Yeah. And I always remember that. And
so true.
And then he said they did some analysis and study, and it was interesting because he's talking to a room of 5,000 of his customers. And he actually says, our research tells us that 40% of you in this room will not be relevant in any significant way within the next 7 years because you can't change fast enough. And I share that with people because what I always say, that doesn't mean you won't be in business. No. You're just no longer relevant to the conversation. Yeah. Because the world is passing by.
Unless you change.
And I think those are associations, standalone associations. Yeah. I even think those are some AMCs that are trying to break the model. And I know Bostrom is. That's what I think you should be doing. And that always sticks with me because I said I promised myself I will never be part of the 40%. Yeah. Ever. Yeah. I'll break it before somebody else breaks it.
Yeah. So. I love that. Okay. So I know you and I can talk.
Forever.
All day. But, so part of our podcast is a rapid fire.
Okay, cool. Cool.
So we're going to close this up with the rapid fire.
Is this like password? Passwords come back now.
I know. Okay. No, do you remember the Actors Studio?
Yeah.
And at the very end, it's kind of like that.
It's not between two ferns, though. It's not. Because that's
It's
funny. That is really funny.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
Deep breath. Okay. What is your current state of mind?
Peaceful.
If you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be?
I would probably learn to say no more often.
I need that one too. What is your favorite word?
Candidly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Of all the properties ALHI represents, do you have a favorite?
It depends on, and I mean this sincerely, it depends on what I'm trying to experience.
Ooh.
Because, gaming would be a different type of hotel, but if I'm literally just for a weekend with my wife, you'd be something at the Broadmoor. But if I want a West Coast ocean, I'll be at Terranea. And I can pick all of them, and I'm not trying to be politically correct there. I really do mean it depends on what I'm trying to experience.
Yeah.
Because my favorite place in the world is Maui. And it's not about a hotel, it's about a destination.
Yes.
Maui.
That's a whole different experience.
Maui is it for me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Who's your favorite person at Bostrom?
Oh, that would be you.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Some people don't answer that correctly, but you did. Do you have a favorite motto?
I do. Pounding the rock.
Pounding the rock.
Yeah. If you want some explanation on that very quickly, everybody knows I'm a diehard San Antonio Spurs fan. Their mantra in their locker room is something that I have replicated, and they are the most successful organization in any sport over the last 30 years, and nobody knows that. And it's all about their culture. In their locker room, the only thing that exists is the Ode to the Stonecutter, and it's a poem by Jacob Riss, who was a 1920s immigrant rights activist. Every one of my employees gets a rock when they start with us with this message on it. And it says, when all hope fails, I think of a stonecutter hammering away at a stone more than 100 times with no success. And on the 101st strike, the stone will split. And I know it's the 100 strikes before it that split the stone. Pounding the rock is a mantra, and it's a question we ask in our organization every day. Are we better today than we were yesterday? Because that is pounding the rock. And I love when I get messages from my team. It's like, we're just pounding the rock.
Wow.
Because they get it. It's a mantra of, it's about perseverance. It's about continuing to move forward and learning from it. So that's my mantra.
That's fantastic. Last question.
Okay.
If you could pick a profession other than the one you're in now, what would it be?
Piano player. The pianist. I always wanted to learn how to play the piano. Yeah, but I'd have to be good only.
Right.
If I was good, I'd have to be good. You know what kind of hurt? It hurt me because it hurt her. We were talking at one time, and my mother, people know I adore, and we're just talking one time, and I said, I always wanted to learn to play the piano. And she goes, you never told me that because I would have made sure you did. And there was this moment, it kind of hurt me because I didn't want her to feel bad. That wasn't the point. But I know that about my mother. Had I ever told her,
she would have made it happen.
She would have literally run through walls to make sure it happened.
That's a great mom.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being on this episode of BCast.
Thank you.
Bostrom. It's been a great conversation. I know our listeners are going to thoroughly enjoy all of these insights and their impact into the work we do with associations. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for the invite, and I appreciate it. Seriously, I appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you on the next episode of BCast.